Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 197 of Chalk Talk. I am your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL, and I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You have heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. Mark, how are you doing today?
3 more before episode 200. We got to do something for that. That's fun.
It feels fitting that episode 200 will be completing this series that we're launching into today, which is our yearly divisional previews, and so it feels like it'll be a good little ending.
Yeah, we have to do some sort of celebration at the beginning or end of the pod for 200. I don't know what that is. We'll figure it out.
If there's any super studious like listeners out there, and you want to go back in the YouTube archives, because not everything's on the podcast feed, and you want to go back to some of the early episodes and just clip up some of the most egregious takes that we've ever had on this show, or some great ones, either way. But that would be a great way. You can send us some clips and we can make fun of ourselves, but I definitely don't have the time to do that. But if any of you want to, I always love to laugh at some of the stupid things I said.
Joe Burrow, handsome merchant, was something I said at one point. That was a bad take. I think that was more recent, but yeah, that's some bad takes.
Yeah, haven't we all? So, all right, well, we are going to dive into a 4-part series we do every offseason where we preview divisions heading into the season. We always put 2 divisions together. Today we're going to cover the AFC East and the NFC East, and we're just going to talk through like a brief offseason recap, some key questions and storylines for each team, and give some over-under win total predictions. And so this is sort of a primer for everybody on what to expect looking around the league, what the landscape is going to look like heading into 2025. And I'm sure Mark will drop some of his favorite futures bets as well. He tends to do that on these shows. So we're going to start with a team that you guys are really familiar with, and this is probably going to be pretty surface level compared to the things you've already listened to and know about this team. But for the sake of completion, we're going to start off with the Philadelphia Eagles, Mark, who went 14-3 last year. And I don't know if you know this or not, but they won the Super Bowl 40-22 over the Kansas City Chiefs, which is pretty cool. So, of course, they lost a lot off of their defense. Some of their key losses this offseason, they lose Milton Williams to the Patriots. Josh Sweat goes to the Cardinals. Mekhi Becton goes to the Chargers. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson goes to the Texans. Brandon Graham goes home to spend time with his wife and kids, which we certainly don't fault him for. And then they brought in a few new guys too. Nobody huge, in my opinion, but they bring in Kenyon Green, Azeez Ojulari, Josh Uche, Adoree Jackson, which is probably the guy that is the biggest signing for me, and then a couple of rookies that you expect to contribute pretty earlier, Jihad Campbell and Andrew Makuba. And so their strength of schedule this year, they will face, and by the way, on these strength of schedules, number 1 would be the hardest, number 32 would be the easiest. They will face the number 21 overall defensive efficiency, the number 11 offenses, and overall their strength of schedule is 4th. And so they do have a pretty difficult schedule. The offenses should have an easier time than the defense trying to replicate what it did last year. Few storylines for me, and then I'll kick it over to you, Mark, is, can they repeat as Super Bowl champions, which is always hard to do, with all of the holes that they developed on the defense, and the potential, at least, for regression in the run game. 2,000-yard seasons are special, and Saquon obviously had a special season last year, but you wonder about drop-off there. And then you also wonder if the offense will falter with their 4th consecutive season with a new play caller at the helm. So their over-under win total is at 11.5. Mark, how do you feel about that, and how do you feel about the Eagles headed into this year?
I think, how could you feel any different than... I understand that there's natural regression when it comes to these teams that win the Super Bowl or go deep in the playoffs, and especially really good defenses. We always talk about kind of the natural regression on defense and how the top 5 to 10 defenses change much more on a year-to-year basis than the top 5 to 10 offenses. having said all of those points and acknowledging that some of them are fair, how could you not feel that Howie has put them in a pretty good spot to kind of continue what they did last year?
Yeah. I mean, you look at some of the things they added. Obviously, you've taken some hits on the defense, but you feel good about bringing in Jahad Campbell. And you look at the secondary, and I think that's where most of the concerns would be on the defense with losing Darius Slay, and you lose another one of your safeties. And so you're going to have 2 new starters in a secondary that was really good last year. And, there's probably some concerns around edge rusher, and everybody has those concerns. And I think that Eagles fans are hyper-focused on their team and maybe don't know the landscape of what other teams look like when it comes to depth and unknowns. But I feel really good about the Eagles going into this season. I've picked them to win the division, and they're probably my favorite still out of the NFC to get back to the Super Bowl. So I will take the over 11.5.
Yeah, I'll take the over. And I mean, we're going to talk about the Eagles plenty and dive into them deep, I'm sure, a ton before the season. But it's just, how much can you say? Like, this is pretty much the same nucleus of a team that, in my opinion, last year is one of the best teams of all time. And they went 14-3, won the Super Bowl in dominating fashion, the NFC Championship in dominating fashion. Obviously, 2 closer games with Green Bay and LA in the playoffs. But they're a team that never lost healthy. They lost their first 2 games with A.J. Brown and Lane Johnson not out there on the field. They lost their 3rd game with Jalen Hurts getting hurt in the first half. So I just think, they had a couple losses, a couple adds. I don't think that they've really changed the identity of what this team is. And I think they're all saying the exact right thing you want to hear from a team that's in this situation. In terms of Jalen, of course, being a psycho who won't wear a Super Bowl ring, and Mailata talking about how he doesn't like the term defending champions and all that stuff. I'm sure we'll kind of break down numbers and guys in and out of the door at these other places. With the Eagles, when you have the stability of Howie, you have the stability that Jalen Hurts brings, you have the stability that, at this point, people have to admit Nick Sirianni brings. And it's, a couple guys are going to come and go every year, but it's hard not to just believe in the system. And what's the NFC East stat, though, about not...
The no repeat champions?
How long is it? 2004, I think?
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think that breaks this year, but I feel like I say that every time the Eagles win a division, I assume they're going to win it the next year, and it hasn't happened. I do think this year probably is the year that changes that.
Yeah, 2004. The Eagles won it 4 times in a row, 2001 to 2004. And since then...
The Chiefs have won how many in a row now?
The Chiefs?
Like 10 in a row? Or it's something crazy, like 8 in a row maybe?
9. You were off in both directions. 9 in a row.
That's unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, that goes back to the Alex Smith days. So it's funny to see those kind of records, and then you look at another division that hasn't had a repeat winner in 21 years. It's pretty unbelievable. But I do think
the furthest back. How far back do you think you have to go? The furthest back you have to go for every other division to have had a repeat winner.
So you're saying for every other division to have 2 non-consecutive years? I'm a little confused by the question, I think.
How far back do you think you have to go to hit the year where every other division has had repeat winner, like a back-to-back winner? Like with the East, you have to go back to 2004. What year do you think you have to go back to for the other 7 to have done it?
I know it's 0 years for both Souths. Houston and Tampa just won back-to-back. Kansas City won back-to-back. LA just won back-to-back, I think.
They did not.
They did not? Okay. I'm sure that they have, though, in this era.
2008, 17 and 18, the Rams won back-to-back.
Yeah, I would have. I assumed. I didn't think it would be San Fran because they've been more kind of up and down. The North, probably Rodgers. They end towards the end of Rodgers, like the 18, 19, 20-ish era.
The Lions are actually back-to-back North champions.
Oh, they won 2 years ago.
23-24, yeah.
You're right. For sure, I think I thought 3 years ago was 2 years ago in my head, where they kind of had like the end of the season where they finished on a good run. The AFC East, the Bills.
Yeah.
The AFC North, same. Is that every division?
Yep.
Yeah, that's every division.
So 2023, you only have to go back to 2023, and that's when the 49ers won it twice in a row. It looks like every other division except for that one, the same team won it in 2024 as won it in 2023. So every division had a repeat winner last year except for the NFC East, who hasn't done it since 2004, and the NFC West, which was coming off of a back-to-back, but the Rams broke that up, which is kind of crazy.
And the Rams have made the playoffs the year before, too, so it's not even like some out-of-nowhere thing. I think they competed for that division, too.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. I like how I totally derailed our discussion there with that, but it's interesting.
I do think this is more like a fantasy thing, and I'll point some of this stuff out as we go along. And you'll like this because you're a big Goddard guy. Dallas Goedert's being drafted as like I think it's about tight end 15. He's being drafted outside the top 14 fantasy tight ends, not being drafted as a starting tight end for fantasy. And I get it; he's had some injury issues, and obviously is the number three guy in the offense in terms of targets. But Dallas Goedert was the number 6 tight end on a points per game basis, even higher if you look at just the games that one of Devontae or A.J. Brown missed. I find Goddard in like the 9th or 10th round, just waiting on tight end and waiting for Goddard to be a great strategy for fantasy. I think you're going to get elite production when he's healthy, or at least at the very worst. If you look over the last couple of years, he's always a top 12 tight end in fantasy on a points per game basis. And if you're missing him in 4 to 6 games per year, and that's what it is. It's like he's not missing 10 games. He hasn't had any seasons where he's missed like more than half the year. He's missing 4 to 6-ish games per year, and you can find replacement value for those couple games if he does get hurt. So I think Goddard is a really good value. I think A.J. Brown and Devontae are pretty good values where they're going as well. I think if any of the three go down, the other two immediately slot up in fantasy terms. And also, I think they're going to be in more close games this year. They're probably going to throw more. They're not going to have a running back who runs for over 2,000 yards, probably. So I think that right there is I think they're going to be passing more often, and I think that's more of a fantasy thing than a kind of a real-life discussion.
Yeah, last season in the 9 games that he was healthy and played in the regular season, so not counting the game he left early with injury, he only had under 4 receptions in 3 of the games, and in 2 of those 3 he had a touchdown. So there's only one game where he had no touchdowns and less than 4 receptions. So I mean he's pretty consistent. He's not going to be like a high volume guy. I don't think he'll ever be that, but still, yeah, I like that call out. So.
But yeah, I don't know if I said this. I'm over 11.5 as well. I have them at 12.5.
All right, let's roll on to the Washington Commanders, who went 12-5 last season, lost the NFC Championship mark. I don't know if you know this, to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it was 55-23. They lose Jonathan Allen, De'Ami Brown, Jeremy Chin, Dante Fowler Jr., and Cornelius Lucas this offseason. The big addition for them is Laramie Tunsil, who I think is just fantastic and is going to help their offensive line out a lot. They bought low on Deebo Samuel, who I kind of think is washed, but if there's a place he's going to work, it's in the Cliff Kingsbury offense. They also brought in Javon Kinlaw. They added Josh Connerly and Trey Amos through the draft. They will face the number 2 defensive schedule, so their work is going to be cut out for their offense. The offense has the second hardest schedule of defenses to face. Their defense gets a bit of a break. They face the number 24 offensive efficiencies, and overall they have the 14th strength of schedule. Their win total is at 9.5. And I think some of the big stuff to watch for them is last year they converted 4th downs at a historic rate. 87% of their 4th downs they converted. And so it's good to be aggressive. It's probably unrealistic to expect to convert at that clip again, though. And so you look at Jaden Daniels and you ask, can he take a leap in year 2? Or even more than that, can he just avoid the sophomore slump? Because we've seen that a lot. And looming over that all is Terry McLaurin holding out right now. And are they going to get a deal worked out there? And that all is important because I don't have a lot of faith in their defense. Now, their defense doesn't have to face a gauntlet offensively, but I don't have a ton of faith there. And then on top of all that, you have that Washington has not won. Actually, I'm going to ask you this. When do you think is the last time Washington has back-to-back double-digit win seasons, Mark?
Pre 9/11. I know, like, those stats I had before this year. It has to be, like, the 90s. It has to be the early 90s.
1991. From 89 to 91, they had 3 straight seasons of double-digit wins. And they haven't done it back-to-back years since. So it's an organization that struggled to sustain success. They've struggled to sustain quarterback play. They appear to have the quarterback. 9.5 feels about right for me with them. I expect some regression. I have a hard time taking the under. I would probably take the over, but I think they're like a 10-7 type of team this year.
I have them exactly at 10-7, so I'm going slightly over. I kind of feel the exact same way about them that I did about Houston last year, where everybody was just expecting them because they did it that year. And Houston had only won the 1 playoff game, whereas Washington won 2, so it's slightly different. But I think everybody was expecting Houston to just, CJ Stroud's the top 5 quarterback now, and Houston's a Super Bowl contender. And I think the same's happened, where Jaden Daniels, top 5 quarterback now for a lot of people, and they're just a Super Bowl contender. And I get it. I get the reasons why you could sell yourself on that. I just think if you go down this roster, I don't think they're at that level. But I do think Jaden Daniels, just like we were kind of saying last year, and I wish I would have kind of believed in it a little bit more, Jaden Daniels rushing his athleticism gives you a high floor. So I think it's hard for me to see Washington flaming out, really, or being like worse than a fringe 500 team. So that's why I do think that 9.5 number is right. I think they have a pretty limited range of outcomes. I think they're going to win 8 to 11 games. I have them at 10, barely making the playoffs. Their schedule, I think, is pretty difficult. You get the AFC West, obviously, Eagles twice. We'll see what Dallas and the Giants are. Obviously, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think it's a pretty difficult schedule. So I think it's the NFC North as well. That's what we have, right? We have the NFC North and the AFC West. I'm trying to think. Yeah.
I think that sounds right.
Yeah. So I think, in my opinion, those are the 2 worst divisions that you can draw in terms of each division on both sides to play the whole division of in the AFC and NFC. So I think it's a tough schedule. Obviously, tough for the Eagles as well. I just believe in the Eagles to kind of sustain success like you talked about, whereas with Washington, I think that's much more up in the air. So give me 10-7. This is not, just like the Eagles one, I wouldn't bet the Eagles win total, but I would have a little bit more confidence betting that over than either side of this Washington one.
All right. Let's roll on to the Dallas Cowboys, who went 7-10 last season. They lost DeMarcus Lawrence, Jordan Lewis, Brandon Cooks. They brought in Kenneth Murray, Kaiir Elam, George Pickens, which I think is a nice get for them. And then through the draft, they added Tyler Booker, Donovan Ezeraku, and Siobhan Revel. They face the 5th toughest set of defenses, the 11th toughest set of offenses, and they overall have the 11th hardest schedule in the NFL this year. Their over-under win total is at 7.5, and this is a team I think has a very wide range of outcomes. So let's talk about the defense first. Their run defense gave up the 2nd most yards before contact in the league last year, and they basically did nothing to address that. And so the question is, can they just naturally progress? Because that was really bad last year. And then you have all the Jerry Jones-ness of it all. Like, how much worse is he going to make the Micah Parsons situation before week 1? I mean, I fully expect Parsons to show up and to play, but that's a just pending disaster. And on the offensive side, you've got Dak Prescott. Obviously his season's cut short last year with injury, so it's a small sample size, but he had a career-high sack rate last year, and a career low in EPA and on-target rate last season before he was injured. And so, can Dak bounce back? And I think getting George Pickens is going to do a lot to help out the offense, having a second target. I think CeeDee Lamb I think I ranked him like 6th on my wide receiver rankings. I think he's a really good receiver. And getting him a running mate in Pickens, if they can keep it together, because we've seen Pittsburgh wide receivers totally derail when they leave Pittsburgh. This team has such a wide range of outcomes. I wouldn't want to touch this. It seems like they are talented enough to be better than 7.5 wins, but I don't have a lot of faith in that. I guess I would take the over and say they're 8-9, but I don't think this is going to be a contending year for Dallas like I think they think it is.
Give me the under. I'm going under. I have them at 5-12. I think they're one of the worst teams in the NFC. If I'm ranking teams in the NFC, I think the only teams I can confidently say are worse are New York and New Orleans. I think who am I missing, Shane? Who do you think is going to be worse than Dallas this year?
Let's see.
Arizona, maybe.
Maybe I could see Arizona.
Minnesota just won 14 games. San Fran, people have to expect to kind of bounce back. They have a high win total. Seattle won 9-10 games with Geno last year. They're pretty.
Carolina, I could see really struggling.
I think Carolina will be a middling kind of 8-ish win team. So I think there's only 4 cellar dwellers for me in the NFC, and it's Arizona, Dallas, New York, and New Orleans. And they kind of, when I was going through and picking my schedules and picking all the records, they were kind of the ones who suffered for the other teams, in my opinion, being at least solid or to good. So I'm pretty, obviously I think the Schottenheimer joke is Schottenheimer hire is one of the joke hires I've ever seen. It's crazy that's where Jerry Jones is going. Kevin Clark, who's good on ESPN, does some good stuff, had a great line on ESPN this week that I think is so true, where he said, I think if you told Jerry he wins the next 3 Super Bowls, but he can't talk to the media and can't ever do a press conference while he does it, I think he says no deal. And I think that's 100% where we are with Jerry Jones.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. If you go back and look at, I don't know, I just have a hard time envisioning, if Dak is healthy, them being a true cellar dweller. Because you go back and look at his record by season. He was 8-8 in 2019, 9-7 in 2017. He's never had a losing record in a season other than 2020 when he only played 5 games, and last year when he played 8 games. And I do think he would have had a losing record last season if he hadn't gotten injured. I don't think they would have overcome that. I think it was kind of a disaster, but it's just hard for me to think that I think Dak's really good. And so it's hard for me to think that they'll just be a complete dumpster fire that falls apart as long as he's healthy. But I can definitely see where you're coming from on that one. And I can definitely see it. Like I said, I think they've got a wide range of outcomes, but I don't think the ceiling of those outcomes is legitimate threat to make a run in the playoffs. I think the ceiling is we have a winning record, and I think the floor is being a cellar dweller, like you mentioned. So we seem to have lost Mark. Hopefully he's able to hop back in, but if not, I will continue rolling along here. And so let's go to the New York Giants. Last season, they went 3-14. Okay, looks like Mark's back. There he is. I saw you freeze, and I don't know how much you heard of what I was saying, but
I as soon as I gave my Jerry Jones soliloquy, I was out.
Okay. You were frozen on the screen for a lot longer than that. I'll just recap. I basically said that Dak Prescott, outside of 2020 when he only played 5 games and went 2-3, and then last year when he went 3-5, he's never had a losing season as a starter. And I don't think that they would have overcome that last year. I think they were really bad, but it's hard for me to see a healthy Dak captaining a dumpster fire. But I do think they have a wide range of outcomes. I think at the top end, it's winning record, but not a serious playoff threat. And at the bottom end, I can definitely see what you're saying, just being a total dumpster fire cellar dweller.
And they have the worst running back room in football. They had that issue last year. I don't think Dowdle was very good, but at least he was serviceable. But he was all they had, and they let him go to Carolina for very little money, and they didn't keep him. Javonte Williams, who was one of the worst running backs in football last year, is supposed to be their lead back. He ran behind the best offensive line in football and had a PFF. He finished 50th of 59 running backs on PFF. I like the Pickens move, but you look at like the running game, you look at the offensive line. All they have on that O-line now is really Cooper Beebe and Tyler Smith. I think the rest of it is kind of suspect. So I just don't see what changed from last year enough outside of Pickens for me to be, thinking that the problems are fixed in Dallas. They had issues on offense before Dak went down.
Yeah, they did. That's fair. So, all right, let's keep rolling on. Let's go to another dumpster fire. That is the New York Giants, who went 3-14 last year. They didn't really lose much of anybody because they honestly didn't have much of anybody, but they lose Azeez Ojulari, Adoree Jackson, which I do think Jackson is a important piece for them, and I don't just say that because he went to Philly, but they lost Isaiah Simmons. But they went out and added Paulson Adebo, who I do like better than Adoree Jackson. They added Javon Holland, who I really like. They get Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart. So they've got an interesting quarterback room. Abdul Carter, Darius Alexander in the draft. They will face the second most difficult set of defenses in the NFL this year. They will face the 16th most difficult set of offenses. And they have the hardest strength of schedule in the NFL this year. Their over-under is at 5.5, and I'm smashing the under on this one. I think they're going to be terrible. And I mean, we can talk with some more nuance about it, but at the end of the day, like the defensive front, well, let me ask you this. Mark, what's the strength of their team?
Yeah, it's definitely defensive line. And it was before they drafted Abdul Carter.
Exactly. And the defensive front is the strength of their team. They ranked 27th in rushing yards allowed per game and 30th in yards after contact last season.
I will say it's a little skewed. The second one isn't.
Yeah, that's why I threw the second one in too, because obviously teams are running on them more because they were blowing them out. But they were 30th in yards after contact allowed last season. So it was a poor tackling team. And, I mean, teams are going to be doing that to them again this year. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was listening to I listened to a Barstool podcast called Pick Central, and a couple of the guys on it are Giants fans, and their argument was like, "How are we going to be worse? We're going to be aggressively better at quarterback." And I know you hate Russell Wilson, but I do generally agree with that. Like, I do think they are going to be much better, whether it's Russ over Jones and who else. They had Locke play some games. DeVito got some snaps. Like, they had terrible quarterback play last season, and I do think they have three competent quarterbacks on the we'll see on Dart, but yeah, I think Dart's probably going to be better than who they were trotting out last year. But even if it's not Dart, Jameis and Russ, I think, are both competent. They're both NFL quarterbacks, definitely at this point.
Yeah.
But the flip side is they play the hardest schedule. If you go look at their schedule, it's unbelievable. What was the rank on that schedule? I think you said it already, but
second most difficult defenses and overall the hardest schedule in the NFL. And
it's insane.
Whoever emerges from that quarterback room is the only piece they changed for an offense that was 31st in scoring last year. Now I will say they went 1-8 in one-score games last year. So we can do if you flipped the result of every one-score game, they're 10-7. And there's some randomness to one-score games, but there's also some clutch factor to it. Like, it doesn't stick over long periods of time, and I would expect them to do a little better in close games, but I just don't think this is going to be a good football team. So give me the under 5.5.
I'm not going to do this for a lot of teams. I think it's just there's two teams in specific on opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of the schedule that I think are worth pointing out, and it's the Giants, and then we'll get to the other team when we get to the NFC West. But the Giants, you just read their schedule. At Commanders, team who went to the NFC Championship last year. At Cowboys, one of their easiest games. Chiefs at home. Chargers at home, team I'm picking to win the Super Bowl. At the Saints, their easiest game, still on the road, but easiest game. Eagles at Denver, a team that made the playoffs last year. At Eagles versus the Niners, team that has a win total of like 10.5. At the Chicago Bears, team I'm picking to make the playoffs. Versus the Green Bay Packers, team I'm picking to make the Super Bowl. At the Detroit Lions, the second favorite in gambling odds to win the NFC. At the New England Patriots, a team that's probably like a dark horse playoff team for a ton of people out there. Versus the Commanders, team that made the NFC Championship. Versus the Vikings, team that won 14 games last year. At the Raiders, team I'm picking to make the playoffs. And then they finish up with another easy game against the Cowboys. You say, let's say the Cowboys are bad. 2 easy Cowboys games, 1 easy Saints game. Let's say the Patriots and Raiders and Vikings aren't that good. That's like maximum six pretty easy games as opposed to 10 games against teams you're like definitely expecting to make the playoffs. It is a gauntlet unlike one I can remember, really. I don't know. And obviously, Commanders play a similar schedule. Eagles play a similar schedule. Cowboys play a similar schedule. Just the way it broke out, the places, and the extra game, and I'd have to really dive into the exact differences on each. The way it broke out for the Giants is brutal. And I think there's even some rest stuff in there that's brutal for them as well, I read. I think they have like some pretty bad rest disadvantage in a bunch of those games. So I don't ever remember coming into the year with as lame duck a coach GM combo as Joe Shane and Brian Dable.
Yeah. Arch Manning, you are a giant.
But they were talking about that on the show. I mentioned they just took a quarterback in the first round. Like, if Dart shows anything, it really complicates the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, Q Jackson Dart coming in for a 1-12 team in December and winning 3 games and dropping him to like the 5th overall pick.
I think he's going to get in earlier than that. I think it's going to be because you just like I just mentioned, if they don't win that Saints and Cowboys game, like I think they're losing Commanders, Chiefs, Chargers, Eagles, Broncos, Eagles. Like I think if you get to week 8 after those 2 Eagles games, like I think you see Dart.
Yeah. That's the desperate move from a dying coach is throw a rookie quarterback out there and see if we can show anything to cling to. It doesn't, honestly, if they fire Shane and Dable, it doesn't complicate anything because whoever comes in is getting rid of, they're not going to care about Dart.
You're probably right.
So Dart's in a terrible position where he's got 1 year he's got a half a season on a terrible team to play well enough to save Dable's job or he's out too.
You know who I get vibes of from Dart?
Who?
Little Heineke-ish. I think he's got some moxie out there. He can move. I think there's issues with the arm.
Yeah.
I think there's some Heineke to him.
All right. Let's move on to the AFC East now. And we've got the incumbent, 5 times in a row champs, Buffalo Bills, who went 13-4 last season, losing to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game 29-32. They lost Amari Cooper, Von Miller, Rasul Douglas, and Mac Hollins this offseason, while adding Joey Bosa, Josh Palmer, Maxwell Harrison, TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson, and Deion Walker. Invested a lot into that defensive front. They will face the 28th most difficult set of defenses, the 23rd most difficult set of offenses, and overall their strength of schedule ranks 28th. So easy schedule. 11.5 is their over-under win total. The questions for me is, will the defensive revamp pay off? Because they poured almost everything into the defense. And their offense is pretty much Josh Allen do everything because we have nothing around you. And by the way, 3 of our 4 biggest free agency contracts were defensive players. Our first 5 draft picks were defensive players. And the lone offensive guy in that mix was Josh Palmer, a guy who's never topped 775 yards in a season, and they paid him $10 million a year. So I don't like what they did offensively. Honestly, and I've ranted about Sean McDermott on here before and said the Bills will never win a Super Bowl with Sean McDermott as their head coach. Sean McDermott is like the defensive guy that's like, Josh Allen's going to do everything on his own, and I'm going to spend every resource I have to go get defensive players to help out my defense. And I think they over invested in the defense. I think they're asking Josh Allen to do too much, and he's doing it. Josh Allen's awesome. But, are they going to win 12 games? Probably. But I still don't think they're going to be able to get over the hump in the AFC.
I actually disagree with you on the defense thing. I think that's the right team building strategy.
Okay.
To pour it into the O-line and the defense and have Josh be Josh and go figure it. I kind of said the same thing when the Chiefs were doing that, when they didn't have the receivers and everybody was whining about it. And I kind of feel the same way with Buffalo. Do you remember? I don't know if you saw when Brandon Beane the day after the draft went on the radio guy in Buffalo and tore him apart. Did you see that? They were yelling that he didn't draft a receiver. I think they were specifically mad he didn't trade up for Golden in the first round, maybe, or they were yelling and screaming. And then he came on the show and they tried to be like, "Oh, hey Brandon, great player last night." They were trying to be buddy, and he's like, "Aren't you the same guys who crapped on us for drafting Josh Allen 8 years ago?" And he came ready with receipts against these guys. He's like, "And you're the same guys sitting here yelling and screaming that we didn't have enough defensively to stop Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game, and you're upset we didn't take a receiver?" He's like, "Did you watch Josh Allen last year? He won MVP. You think the problem's on offense?" And I was like, I kind of think he's cooking. But the problem to me, I don't think this is a Brandon Beane issue. I think Brandon Beane is a great GM. I think he's done a great job. I think that roster's amazing. Maybe the best roster in the AFC. We've talked about this plenty of times. They are not getting over the hump until they get rid of Sean McDermott, and I don't think they're ever going to get rid of him because they're going to win 12 to 14 games every year that Josh Allen stays healthy.
Yeah.
Same thing with Lamar. It's not because I think Harbaugh's a better coach. I don't think Harbaugh's holding Baltimore back in the same way.
Right.
But I don't think Harbaugh can ever really get fired either because they're never going to win unless Lamar or Allen get hurt, and then it's going to be hard to fire a guy because Lamar or Allen got hurt. I don't see the scenario where McDermott loses his job. And I don't think he's ever going to get over the top. And I think that's going to be the curse of Josh Allen's career.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I would still just throw Josh Allen a bone. Go get him some. Go get him a series. Go do something for him. I agree with what you're saying, but also look at the way the Chiefs' offense imploded last year in the playoffs. You can push that ball too far. Eventually you get to diminishing returns, and I feel like spending 8 of your 9 biggest assets in the offseason on defensive players might be swinging a little too far, but the draft doesn't always fall your way, and you can that plays out sometimes. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they need to move on from McDermott, and I just don't know that they will because they're always going to be good, like you said.
I'm trying to remember what they did in the draft this year. The Bills,
Hairston, T.J. Sanders, Landon Jackson, Deion Walker.
I saw Landon Jackson actually just got cleared. I think he was on the pup or something. I think he had an injury or something. I think he's healthy now. But I think it's one of the receivers are just stupid expensive now. Even the average one. I wish I had some of the names that got paid this offseason and what they got paid because I remember thinking oh my god, that is who's the Giants receiver that got paid this offseason?
Darius Slayton.
Oh, what did Darius Slayton make?
I had too much. Basically, what they didn't pay what they didn't pay Barkley last year.
Oh, I think it was more than that. What was that contract? Darius Slayton,
$12 million a year.
3 years, $36 million, 22 fully guaranteed. What are we doing? If Darius Slayton's making $12 million a year at that position, that throws that kind of how you have to pay that position so out of whack. I kind of get why they do what they do and why they're doing what they're doing. And maybe that means you should place a higher priority on it in the draft. I think they tried that last year. I do think they swung and missed with Keon Coleman. I was not a fan of that guy pre-draft, and I didn't see anything last year to grab onto to kind of change that opinion. At least they tried last year. We didn't love the receiver draft this year necessarily. Yeah. So Hairston was, I think, a good pick at that spot. We liked the other guys they got in day 2 as well. So I don't, again, I don't think this is a Bean issue at all. I have them winning 14 games. I have them as the 1 seed in the AFC, and part of that is I don't have another team in this division winning 10 games. So
Yeah.
every other team is around 500, or in one team's case, I think falling way below. But I think the lack of a true contender in that division really helps the Bills. Whereas the Chiefs have a couple teams I think to deal with, and whereas even if you want to say, I think the Ravens have 2 teams to potentially deal with.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the rest of the division. Let's talk Miami Dolphins, who went 8-9 last year. They lost Javon Holland, Kendall Fuller, Calais Campbell, Jalen Ramsey, and Jordan Poyer. They added James Daniels, Kenneth Grant, and Jonah Seven-I. I forgot how to say his last name, but we'll go with that.
Savigny?
Savigny?
I think so.
Yeah. I don't have my pronunciation guide because it's not a draft show. Savigny. They will face the 21st most difficult set of defenses, 13th most difficult set of offenses, and overall have the 24th most difficult strength of schedule. Their over-under win total is at 8.5. They do have an easy schedule, and maybe that can get them on track, but I have legitimate concerns all over this team, and I have for years, but the Dolphins' offensive line was 28th in pass block win rate and 26th in run block win rate last year. And the only additions to that group were James Daniels, a mediocre right guard coming off an Achilles injury, and Jonah Savigny, a rookie I gave a 3rd-round grade to and noted his struggles as a pass blocker. And they're going to protect one of the most fragile quarterbacks in the NFL. And that's not to mention all their losses in the secondary and the numerous culture issues there. Their over-under is at 8.5. I will take the under on the Dolphins.
Maybe my favorite under on the board. I have them winning 5 games. I've talked about this. I feel like I have 1 or 2 teams like this every year. I think we've done this on the show before. I get my shows mixed up with my radio show and this sometimes, but they are the ultimate iceberg team for me. Like they're on the boat. Their win total's 8.5. They've made the playoffs a couple times. They think we're just gonna go win 9 or 10 games. I think the iceberg that's sitting right in front of them is not just Tua's health, but also the fact that Tua's health is combined with, I think, the 32nd best offensive line in the NFL. I think it is the worst offensive line in the league going into the year. And not to mention, I think they have the worst secondary in football going into the league this year. So I think it's a pretty bad combination of things when you have a quarterback whose brain has been scrambled so many times that you're worried every time he takes a hit that this is going to be it and it's the last snap he's ever going to play. You have an offensive line to go with that's terrible, especially at pass blocking. And you have a secondary that if you are in a close game and shootouts where Tua is healthy, the defense is going to give up just as many points as you score on offense. So I just think, I like Mike McDaniel. We argued about this when we ranked our head coaches. I think Mike McDaniel's been dealt a bad deck in some ways. And I think he will eventually, he'll go be an OC somewhere. And I think he will be like a sexy option as a reclamation project in 5 years. Like, not very different guy than Dan Quinn, but like a similar trajectory where he goes and is a coordinator and is a hot shot coordinator again, goes to the right spot, and I think we're right back in a spot where he's getting hired as a head coach. He's not like a guy like Steichen in a way where I'm kind of concerned if Steichen gets fired, like I don't think he ever gets a job again. Like I just think like certain guys, like that's your chance, and you didn't show enough for people, even though I think it's not his fault at all, and he's probably just going to be a coordinator after that forever. But McDaniel, I think, is getting fired in the season, mid-season this year. We're going to do our first coach fired thing. He has to be in the conversation.
Steichen's probably in that conversation too.
The thing with Steichen is like they've won 8-9-ish games each year with the quarterback problems. Like they had Minshew his first year. They had Flacco and Richardson. Like, is it going to be? Are they going to get worse quarterback play from Jones and Richardson? Like, I think it's probably going to be like the same.
Yeah.
I just think he's a good enough coach that like they're a 7-8 win-ish floor type team. I think they have like a 9-win ceiling, but I don't think he will I think, and I guess you could say the same with Miami, that they've had a high floor in the McDaniel era. I think that changes this year. I think the roster took a nosedive. They were in such cap hell that they had. I mean, who were the losses again? Could you read the losses?
Javon Holland,
Second.
Kendall Fuller, Calais Campbell, Jalen Ramsey,
Secondary.
Jordan Poyer.
Secondary. Like,
Yeah.
I thought there was even an offensive line guy that they were. Teron Armstead retired.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about him retiring. I didn't even write him down.
And that's just all those guys in the secondary, on a secondary that I think like was kind of washed in some ways last year. Even it like wasn't that good, and then losing your best offensive lineman. And if you go look at some of the numbers of the Tua era of games when Teron Armstead has missed time, it's a little Lane Johnson-ish for the Eagles, where they are a really good team when Teron Armstead plays, and the offense drops off the face of the planet when Teron Armstead is out. I'm gonna look for the numbers, but that's actually like the number one thing. I meant to say that earlier in the conversation. That's like the number one thing I'm kind of concerned about.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wrote about their offensive line woes, but I totally forgot about the Armstead retirement. That's a killer for sure. So, okay, let's move on to the Jets. I'll give a rundown while you look for that number. The Jets were 5-12 last season. They lose Devontae Adams, DJ Reed, Javon Kinlaw, Morgan Moses, Tyron Smith. They added Justin Fields, Brandon Stevens, Andre Sisco, Armand Mimbu. They will face the 26th most difficult set of defenses, 18th offenses, and overall the 17th most difficult schedule. Their over-under win total is at 5.5. Question here is Justin Fields. Can he spark something? He was 4-2 as a starter last season before he lost that job to Russell Wilson, but he had the lowest yards per attempt of his career. What's that?
You didn't see the Fields news today?
No.
Carted off the field.
Oh.
Toe injury, though, now they're saying. So
okay, he'll be fine.
Stepped on, but then some people are saying maybe a foot injury, which would obviously be a bigger issue. 6 weeks until week 1, though.
Yeah.
I think it's probably fine. But there was a 20 to 30 minute stretch this morning where all we heard was carted off with a lower leg injury, and people were assuming like. I think some people might have even said that they thought it was non-contact and they didn't see him get stepped on. So there was a morning of like Aaron Rodgers got hurt on our first drive with Aaron Rodgers, and now Justin Fields can't even get to the first drive.
Yeah, I had not seen that. That would have been a disaster. But so yeah, assuming he'll be healthy, if he got stepped on or whatever, he should be fine. But can he lead the Jets to their first season not ranked in the bottom 10 in scoring since 2016? They haven't been outside of the bottom 10 of scoring in almost a decade now. And then you look at the defense. Their defense collapsed after they scapegoated Robert Saleh for the offense's ineptitude. And then they lost a lot of personnel. So can the defense return to being a strength of the team with all the guys they lost? And they have the same thing with the Giants. Something about New York, I guess, or New Jersey. But they were 3-7 in one-score games last year. So if you can get some natural, regression to the mean there, maybe that helps. But their over/under win total is at 5.5. Mark, where are you leaning with the Jets?
One of my favorite overs on
Okay.
the year. I think the Jets and the Dolphins are going to basically flip, where the Jets are now going to be the 9-win team. I have them at 9-8. And I have a lot of AFC teams at 9-8, actually, just the way it broke out. They were one of the teams that got the nod into the playoffs. Like, I really do think this is going to be a team that competes to make the playoffs. And I think we've talked about it plenty of times. Take a drink if you've heard us say this before. A mobile quarterback gives you a high floor. And not to mention that I think that defense that was a top 5 to 10 defense 2 years ago still has most of that talent. I think that was a horrible locker room situation. I think there ended up being Saleh and Rodgers camps on the team, it felt like. And I feel like the defense didn't buy in the way on the solid system the way that they did in 2023. I think Saleh had a lot of his played. And it seems like Aaron Glenn is handling everything from a much kind of better standpoint, I think, from the media and everything that goes into it. It helps when you don't have Aaron Rodgers on the team. But I think that's going to be a really – I mean, we've seen plenty of times the first-year head coach generally gets things energized, especially on the defensive side of the ball. If you get a defensive coordinator who comes in there, we've seen D'Amico Ryans, Dan Quinn, even Saleh when he first got there, with at least how the Jets were on defense. Like, we've seen plenty of these guys step in and the defense go back to what it was, back to a top 10 defense after a rough year. And Sauce had a down year. A couple of their young guys had down years. I think that the Jets are going to get right back into being a top 10-ish defense. They get a high floor on offense. They have a phenomenal offensive line, one of the better offensive lines in football, especially if you're high on Membu and you think he's going to produce for them right away. Breece Hall had a bit of a down year. I expect him to have a big bounce back year. So an interesting stat for Garrett Wilson out there. So Garrett Wilson being drafted, fringe top 15 receivers in fantasy. And there's some people out there like, why am I going to buy in on Wilson now? Rodgers would have been a better guy for him for fantasy, and Fields can't throw. Fun fact, what quarterback has DJ Moore played with that he averaged the most receiving yards per game when he played with them?
DJ Moore?
Justin Fields is the answer.
Okay.
But, so I saw DJ Moore's played with all these different quarterbacks in his career, and if you look at his receiving yards per game with those guys, it's between 50 to 70 generally.
Okay.
He had 96 receiving yards per game with Justin Fields. I do think some of the passing limitations with Fields are overblown. He does tend to lock in on one guy sometimes, and I think that's perfect for this Jets offense. It's going to run the ball a ton and has an alpha dog guy in Garrett Wilson to get the ball to. With a great O-line, an energized coach, Aaron Rodgers out of the... It must feel like a breath of fresh air for those guys, going to work every day and not having to answer questions about ayahuasca and darkness retreats and if he's going to be a vice presidential candidate. And I think it must be night and day at training camp, at Jets training camp this year.
Yeah, and the Steelers are on the opposite end of that. I have no idea what they were thinking, but we'll get to them in a later episode. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think the Jets, even if Fields struggles as a passer, we know how much a mobile quarterback can do for the run game, and you've got Breece Hall, and you've got Justin Fields, and I just think there's some things you can work with there. And weirdly, I like that they brought in a defensive coordinator because that's where a lot of the talent is. And it feels like if you can get the defense back to that level that it might still be at if you hadn't fired Robert Saleh, that that the offense can just get you to 500. And I kind of think that's about where I have them. I have them like a 8-9 win team.
Totally agree. And I think signing Fields, people made fun of it at the time. That I think he got a good amount of money. Forget what that deal looked like. And I think he got more money than Rodgers and some of these other guys, Wilson and some of the other guys that I think general consensus might have thought were going to get more money than him. I love what the Jets did because he's the one guy that if it works out this year, he could actually be your quarterback next year.
Yeah, they signed Fields to a 2-year, $40 million contract. Yeah. But it looks like, let's see if I can read this out real quick. His cap number this year is $8 million. And then if they cut him after that, they would say, oh no, they'd still have $22 million. So they're pretty much on the hook for most of it.
No, yeah, I think it's pretty much like a real deal.
$30 million fully guaranteed.
Yeah.
So
I think part of it becomes guaranteed at a certain point. I think it's almost like they're probably going to have Fields for 2 years.
Yeah. So which I like that. You might as well that doesn't kill you if he just sucks and you draft a quarterback. But if he's decent, you're not locked into, man, now we've got to pay him after 1 year. So.
And he's been a professional about this twice, where he's been drafted and there's another guy who comes. I mean, he was professional about in Chicago knowing the situation that they were going to have the number 1 pick. And then he was professional in Pittsburgh when he got benched for Russell Wilson and shouldn't have been. But when he was benched for Russ and as they were 4-2, I think that the Jets can do a similar kind of strategy to what the Steelers were doing for the first 6 weeks last year.
Yeah.
Where they were running the ball, they were winning 20 to 13 games, they weren't turning the ball over. And Justin Fields was a huge part of that.
Yep. All right, let's go to the last team in the division. The New England Patriots were 4-13 last year. They really didn't lose anybody because they didn't have anybody. Juwan Bentley, David Andrews. They spent a ton of money in free agency. Added Milton Williams, Stephon Diggs, Carlton Davis, Harold Landry, Robert Spillane, Morgan Moses. In the draft, they added Will Campbell, Travion Henderson. They also added Garrett Bradbury. They face the 30th most difficult defense efficiency, 22nd most difficult offense. They've got the 31st most difficult strength of schedule. Their over-under win total is at 7.5. So, with the Patriots, they spent a ton of money, which they can do. They're a bad team with a rookie contract quarterback. But they spent all that money and they still don't have a great skill group. It is much improved, especially if Diggs can stay healthy and bounce back a little bit. Drake May was in a bad situation last year, and I gave him a big break because of that. But his numbers are also terrible. He was 30th in interception rate, 25th in on-target pass rate. He also had a 21.7% pressure to sack rate. So it was bad. And the offensive line was a disaster. They were second to last in pass block win rate and dead last in run block win rate. But they brought in Morgan Moses, Garrett Bradbury, and Will Campbell all to help out. And we both have concerns about Campbell at tackle, but at guard, I think he'll be a really good player if he doesn't stick at tackle. They also have a really easy schedule, and Mike Vrabel is in the building. And you and I are both pretty big believers in Mike Vrabel. So at 7.5, where do you sit with the Patriots this year?
This isn't one I'd touch either. I have them in 9. I'm so conflicted on them because I think Drake May, we're both high on Drake May. I said this on my show on Saturday, and the people I was with talked to me like I was an insane person. I still don't think it's at all crazy if Drake May ends up having a better long-term career than Jaden Daniels.
It's possible, yeah. I mean, it's 1 year,
Yeah. I think people hear that and they're like, Jaden Daniels is the 5th best quarterback already. Drake May sucked last year. The team was horrible. And I agree that there were some bumps for Drake May. I think it was a horrible situation and a horrible team. Much different situation than what Jaden Daniels walked into. And I do think May's a bit more of a project. Whereas I think Jaden Daniels, we've talked about it plenty, had the athleticism and the running ability that immediately he was going to step in and be a productive guy right away. He was also older than Drake May coming into the NFL and played a lot more snaps in college. I think that Drake May could just turn into Josh Allen this year and be elite, and the Patriots are an 11-win team probably if that happens. But I think it's probably going to be a bit more linear than that. It was linear with Josh. And it's been linear with plenty of guys, and I think it's probably going to be a slow process where he shows a lot of flashes this year, but I still probably don't think they have the weapons around him to supplement a full-on breakout from him. Stephon Diggs, I think he's cooked. He's their number 1 guy. Kyle Williams, a guy who I like from the draft, is probably the number 2 receiver. You have Pop Douglas in their slot, meh. Hunter Henry at the tight end, meh. Travion, I'm excited about. Ramondre's pretty meh. The offensive line's got a lot of issues. But, I think Vrabel he's another coach that I think is a bit of a 7-win floor. I don't think that the bottom's going to drop out on Mike Vrabel ever. I think he's that good of a coach, and he's always going to have the guys locked in, and you're never going to get the team under Vrabel that's not motivated. And I think that even with all the issues, it's hard for me to not say, well, they have Mike Vrabel, Drake May could be a lot better at quarterback, the defense is going to be better, they have a good secondary, and I don't think they have a lot of potential to be that bad again. I think they're going to be better this year.
All right. Yeah, I think I have the slight under here. I think they will be better. I don't think I'd be willing to say they're going to win 8 games. I had them more of a 7-10 type team, but I do think the arrow is going to point up. They spent money. They didn't spend it wisely, maybe in some situations, but it doesn't really matter. It's about raising.
I think the Milton Williams contract was good.
That's fine. I don't like the Stephon Diggs one, but it's if you want to pay a guy that I think is kind of washed a crap ton of money for 2 years to help out your young quarterback, that's fine. You're not butting up against the salary cap right now. I've got no problem with that. So I don't think these are contracts that I would like for most teams, but for the Patriots, it's fine. And I think the arrow is going to point up for them, but I don't think they're going to be ready to take a huge leap this season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But it's a little bit, we're going to get to the Raiders when we talk about it. And I keep saying the Raiders have by far the worst head coaching situation in football last year. Patriots are close with Mayo. Mayo was absolutely terrible. So maybe I'm even underrating how big of a deal that is to go from Mayo to Vrabel.
Yeah. All right, well, that's going to do it, guys. That's our AFC and NFC East preview show. We are going to be on a brief hiatus. I'm going to be gone next week, but we will be back the week after that, starting to drop these divisional previews. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. If you would like to hear us cover some different aspects, some sort of different format, drop us a line on Twitter and let us know, and we can try to work that into future episodes. But Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts you want to fire off?
Nothing. I've been doing some college research. I'm trying to think what I should fire off here. I'll just fire off Nussmeier for Heisman. I think LSU is a legitimate national title contender, and I don't know if they're kind of a sexy team to make the playoffs. I don't know if people are taking them seriously enough as a title contender. Harold Perkins on the other side. Brian Kelly, I'm not a fan, but he's at least going to have them ready to be a 9-10 win team. I think they take that next step this year. LSU, a legitimate national title contender. I'm kind of going all over.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you for joining us for episode number 197 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. NFL. And we will catch you guys next time.